Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
San Diego County leaders are taking steps to address the high cost of living. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. This month, the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution to study what effect corporate and private equity home ownership have on housing costs. As KPBS reporter Andrew Dyer tells us, it's a topic researchers are also tackling.
A San Diego tenant group won a small victory this month when the resolution passed. District 3 Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer explained why the county is taking up the issue at the July 16th Board of Supervisors meeting.
We've all been focusing for the last many years on what we can do in San Diego County to confront the rising costs of rents and buying a home and the crisis of housing affordability in our region. A big area that we have not yet tackled head on is the role being played by corporate landlords like Blackstone.
But not everyone agrees corporate home ownership is a significant driver of housing costs. Property management representatives spoke out against the resolution, calling it a waste of time and resources. Blackstone says it owns fewer than 1% of rentals in San Diego. How much could that impact costs? Michael Reher is an assistant professor of finance at the Rady School of Management at UC San Diego. He researches how capital investment impacts the real estate market.
I'm sure it has some effect. It may not be driving. I mean, rental costs in San Diego have really surged. Is this the dominant driver of it? Probably the answer is no.
Reher says that's not the whole story. The types of housing institutional investors such as Blackstone buy does have an effect.
So the evidence suggests that there is an increase in rent prices. However, a lot of the increase in rent prices comes through what we might think of as an improvement in quality. So a lot of institutional investment in housing is associated with reductions in crime rates and rehabilitation of dilapidated properties and various other measures of housing quality as well.
This means people with lower incomes are more likely to live in the types of lower quality housing targeted by investors for investment. But corporate ownership of multifamily housing and apartments isn't new. Reher says what's relatively new is corporate ownership of single-family homes, but the effect is still being studied. He didn't comment specifically on the county's new effort or whether it could help bring down housing prices, but there's one policy prescription he says research shows does have that effect.
So I think the prevailing consensus, I think, in the research community is removing any constraints on kind of building new housing. It's kind of like one of the most important things that can be done for improving housing affordability, rather than limiting, investment by particular kinds of institutions in existing housing.
A new report from tenant groups looking at rent prices at Blackstone's San Diego properties is expected Thursday. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Housing and homelessness go hand in hand in California. Coming up, the concerns being raised about Governor Newsom's push to clear homeless encampments across the state. The Nixon fire near the border of Riverside and San Diego County has now grown to nearly 5,000 acres. CAL FIRE says 250 personnel are working to contain the fire, including firefighters from San Diego. It's just 5% contained. Evacuation warnings have been issued near the county line. A small 2-acre spot fire did cross into San Diego County, but was put out by firefighters.
Jumping ahead to tonight, we're dropping down to lows right around the mid-60s, so not too bad, but we still have to deal with some of those low clouds hanging on, especially there near the coast. So if you're out late in the day, early in the day, you know the story. Make sure you're just taking it easy on the road. You may run into some tricky travel or some lowered visibility. Though we are tracking a slight rise in temperatures as we head into the weekend. We'll tell you which areas are heating up coming up.
Tensions in the Middle East are dramatically escalating after 2 assassinations in the past 48 hours. Brian Abel reports it's placing hopes of a ceasefire deal to end the war in Gaza in peril, and a warning some of what you'll see and hear in this story may be disturbing.
Overnight in Iran, the targeted killing of Hamas's political chief Ismail Haniyeh, a dramatic blow to the militant group. The future of ceasefire talks with Israel over Gaza now unclear, as Haniyeh was a key player. Iran blaming Israel and vowing to avenge the killing. Israel has neither confirmed nor denied it was behind the assassination. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu didn't mention Haniyeh's death in a speech Wednesday, but said Israel would, quote, settle the score with anyone who harms us. Former U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper calling the strike an embarrassment for Iran, who he says will have to respond.
Absolutely, very significant, arguably the most important attack against Iran and its proxies since the April strike in Damascus.
In response to that strike in April, Iran launched dozens of missiles and drones toward Israel in an hours-long attack. The majority were intercepted by Israel, with U.S. forces lending a hand. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin saying the U.S. would do so again. Haniyeh was the second leader of an Iran-backed group assassinated in a 24-hour period. On Tuesday, Israel killed Hezbollah's most senior military commander in Lebanon, Fuad Shakir, in a targeted strike. Israel says he was responsible for this rocket attack on a football pitch in Israeli-occupied Golan Heights that killed 12 young people. The killings raising fears that the conflict in Gaza could become a wider war.
This is very dangerous. The wave of war is coming rather than peace coming to the region.
In Washington, Brian Abel, KPBS News.
San Diego's City Council has appointed 3 new members to the Privacy Advisory Board. KPBS reporter Scott Rodd says the move will help restore independent oversight of surveillance technology used by the city.
The Privacy Advisory Board is tasked with reviewing surveillance equipment used by the police and other city departments. That includes drones and camera-equipped streetlights. But a recent KPBS investigation found that vacancies on the board have forced it to cancel meetings in recent months. Ted Womack Jr. is the Civic Engagement Manager at Alliance San Diego and one of the new appointees to the Privacy Advisory Board.
Transparency is really important. Everybody, wants to feel like we can trust law enforcement and that we can be protected.
Womack Jr. says he wants to be a voice for the community on the board.
When it comes to privacy, when it comes to surveillance and things of that nature, it's really important to have folks who are not just thinking with a law enforcement type mind behind it.
Mayor Todd Gloria is responsible for appointing new members to the board, but he left the seats empty. So the city council took the rare move of stepping in and filling them. A spokesperson for Gloria previously told KPBS that the criteria for board members made it difficult to find appointees. Scott Rodd, KPBS News.
Hillcrest is now officially an LGBTQ cultural district. That after San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria signed an update to the Hillcrest Community Plan into law today.
All right, let's do it. And we're done.
The update will create more protections for people who live in the area and rules for developers who build there. The amended plan also calls for the addition of more than 17,000 homes over the next 30 years.
This new plan will add capacity for over 17,000 new homes for San Diegans right here in this community. I want you to think of healthcare professionals that are working just down the street at UC San Diego Health or at Scripps Mercy Hospital, actually being able to live in the same neighborhood where they work.
The update also establishes Hillcrest as an entertainment district with the goal of giving small businesses in the area an economic boost. Balboa Park's buildings need millions of dollars worth of repairs the city says it can't afford. KPBS reporter Katie Anastas says advocates are calling for the creation of an outside group to raise money and manage projects.
Daniela Miranda and her family visited Balboa Park on the last day of their San Diego vacation.
It's beautiful. It's so gorgeous. I can't take enough pictures of the architecture and the scenery.
City leaders, arts organizations, and other park tenants want to keep it that way, but they need funding. Advocates say the park needs restroom and lighting upgrades and roof, electrical, and plumbing repairs, especially at the museums and other tourist attractions. They say it will cost about $500 million.
Some of the needs are beyond the abilities of the institutions themselves to fundraise for, and are beyond the current ability of the city to be able to finance, given the city's current financial condition.
That's why a new report from the Burnham Center for Community Advancement says the park needs another group to help fundraise.
Government has a certain audience. Well, a nonprofit or other private partner that is leading the effort in the park is going to have a different audience and can do things a little differently than the city. So we think there's the more the merrier on this, as long as it's well organized. That's the key.
Park stakeholders are working together on what that partner should look like. They hope to have something ready to implement by the end of the year. Katie Anastas, KPBS News.
Democrats are eagerly awaiting to see who Vice President Kamala Harris picks as her running mate, as a few contenders appear to be rising to the front of the pack. Our Washington correspondent, Julia Benbrook, has the latest on the search.
Just over a week ago, Kamala Harris was President Joe Biden's running mate. Now she's at the top of the ticket and searching for her own VP. The Harris team is working at a rapid pace to research and test out the top candidates.
I think being mentioned is certainly an honor. My job is to make sure that, and I trust that Vice President Harris' judgment, she'll make the best choice she's going to. But one way or another, she is going to win in November.
Several of those on the list have been hitting the airwaves and the campaign trail, showing their support.
She is ready to not just be the standard bearer of our party, but to be the 47th president of the United States of America.
And taking on former President Donald Trump.
He called her a bum. If he wants to see a bum, he ought to look in the mirror.
I have 2 daughters and a granddaughter. I really worry about their rights if Donald Trump is elected again and J.D. Vance is the vice president.
The top contenders include Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear are also still in conversation. There will be a decision soon. A source familiar with the planning says that Harris and her running mate will travel to a series of battleground states next week. Reporting in Washington, I'm Julia Benbrook.
I'm Jeff Bennett. Tonight on the NewsHour, the assassination of a top Hamas leader further roils the Middle East. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Governor Gavin Newsom is calling on California cities to ban homeless encampments in public spaces. Several cities in San Diego County already have bans in place, including Escondido and San Marcos. But KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne says some feel the move is being made too soon.
Backpacks, blankets, and sleeping bags spill out of a shopping cart next to Bobby Kofelt. She has been homeless in Escondido for 6 years. Next to her is her 20-year-old son, Jacob. He is autistic and doesn't say much.
That made it even more of a struggle because I was, being out here, my son, my mom, and just trying to, keep together as a unit, but it gets difficult.
Kofelt says camping in plain sight is for their safety. She feels rapes, attacks, and theft happen more to people who are hidden. But as encampment bans come down, she fears that safety is fading.
That's the thing. The cops, when they come and they tell you gotta move, they tell everybody to move, and everybody ends up going out to the jungle. I'm not going out to the jungle because things happen out there, and I can't. And they, because they push you further and further away from where you can get the resources.
Her mom has dementia and is in a nursing home. Her son could get shelter in a group home, but doesn't want to be without his mom.
Doesn't want to be taken, singled out, and be put in a group home. I mean, is that really how you handle something? I mean, to break up the family like that? I mean, It doesn't seem right.
And Kofelt doesn't want to go to a shelter because she'd have to give up her cats. The Supreme Court's ruling in City of Grants Pass versus Johnson allows cities to ban homeless encampments in public areas, even if the cities don't have enough shelter beds. Now, Governor Gavin Newsom is pressuring California cities to take action on dismantling the camps or lose out on funding.
Ultimately, it makes people less trustworthy. So you hear a lot people say they don't want help. And you have to realize there's something you need to add to that sentence for it to make sense.
Holly Herring is a homeless advocate in North County. She used to be homeless and understands what people want and don't want.
They don't want the help you're offering. They don't want the help from you. And there can be a point in time after a number of engagements where somebody can come to trust that you actually have a solution for them, that they'll say, all right, I'm interested in that solution.
She thinks enforcement will burn any trust or relationship built with outreach workers.
And being more guarded about what they say, where do they sleep at night, what kind of environment. Their interactions with law enforcement are going to make it more difficult when they do come for the solution to actually help house people.
The cities of Escondido and San Marcos recently enforced encampment bans. They both reference public safety in their decisions. There is no homeless shelter in San Marcos. Instead, the city pays over $100,000 for regional support every year.
I am aware of these resources. I am aware of these organizations that are helping in the community. What I continue to encounter is the fact that we are told that either there's no capacity or that a family doesn't meet the particular qualifications.
San Marcos council member Maria Nunez was the lone vote against the ordinance. She thinks that the ban leaves homeless people with little to no options.
What happens to that family? What happens to those individuals? And now that we are going to be enforcing and potentially citing individuals, potentially ending up with misdemeanor citations, then I can't help to wonder then, what are we going to do then with these individuals? Then are they going to be detained? Are they going to be incarcerated? Where do they go?
Interfaith Community Services is the largest homeless service provider in Escondido. CEO Greg Angel says the recent orders mean people need places to go even more.
Short-term housing options, but ultimately what people need is a permanent home of their own. So it really calls for the need for rental assistance to help people overcome the high cost of getting into a new home.
Back in Escondido, next to her overflowing shopping cart, Bobby Kofelt has one message.
If you really want to help, come out and meet the people, figure out what can be done instead of enforcing these laws that just push everybody away and out, so we're like hidden, in the shadows, because we're never going to be hidden in the shadows. All we want to be is housed,
Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
With new housing developments happening across the county, it can be confusing to understand what affordable housing is and who qualifies. Here's a breakdown. An $84,000 salary is considered low income in San Diego County, opening the way for many to qualify for affordable housing. Stephen Russell at the San Diego Housing Federation says qualifications and benefits also vary depending on family size, apartment management, and demographics.
Some may be money just for veterans, some for folks with formerly addicted, some who are families. They're looking for someone who's eligible not just by income, but possibly by the category of who they are in this world. What's shocking to me is how many people in the community don't realize that they would be classified as low income for the purposes of affordable housing.
Right now, the average monthly rent for a one-bedroom in San Diego County is more than $2,000. Russell says there are wait lists for such rentals, which could lead to a wait of around 3 years to move into an apartment. The Federal Reserve wrapped up a two-day meeting today, during which it signaled interest rates cuts are on the horizon. How can households prepare their finances for what's next? Karen Kafa is in Washington with more.
With progress on inflation, the Federal Reserve inching closer to bringing its benchmark interest rate down from a 23-year peak. But Greg McBride, chief financial analyst for Bankrate, says households should know those rate cuts will come slowly. Just one or two won't dramatically reduce consumers' interest payments.
So if you have high-cost credit card debt, or even a home equity line of credit, many of which have rates in the double digits right now, you need to continue to prioritize paying down that debt aggressively.
McBride says households waiting for more favorable terms on loans can use this time to make sure their credit is in prime shape.
Make sure your credit rating is in the best possible position that it can be so you can qualify for the most competitive rates. Comparison shop, not only for the financing, but for the vehicle, for the home. Negotiate, make sure you're not overpaying on price.
Jacob Channel, senior housing economist for LendingTree, says it's a good time for potential home buyers to do their research.
The Fed is lowering rates. Mortgage rates are probably going to come down too. And like people always say, real estate is local. So look at what's going on in your broader market.
Channel also says whatever the borrowing landscape, it's important for consumers to set their own comfort zone.
At the end of the day, what matters most is what your personal finances look like, what you can truly afford, what you'd be comfortable borrowing.
In Washington, I'm Karen Kafa.
Well, we'll start you off with your weather headlines. What you need to know as we head over the next few days into the weekend. We are tracking a little bit of monsoonal moisture, and with that uptick in moisture here across SoCal, we could see some thunderstorms, especially there across more mountainous terrain into the deserts. Now, we are tracking a slight warming trend here into the weekend across a lot of the area, especially there closer towards the coast into our western valleys, though we are still hanging on to those coastal low clouds here over the next few days. Again, especially early in the day and late in the day. Tonight, we're dropping down to a low of 63 there in Oceanside. San Diego at 66, a little bit further east, Ramona a little bit cooler here tonight with a low of 59, Mount Laguna 64, and Borrego Springs dropping down to 78. Now for our Thursday, it's still rather comfortable here along the coast, though things a little hotter, of course, as you head a little bit further inland. Across the area here for tomorrow, highs staying relatively steady and comfortable along the coast, 77 in Oceanside, 76 on tap in San Diego, 90s for Ramona and Borrego Springs. You're sitting in the low 100s, Mount Laguna hitting a high of 73. Like I said, we are tracking an increase in moisture here across the area as we do head into Thursday afternoon. Some of those storms could produce some lightning, even rumbles of thunder. So heads up, we are tracking potentially some gustier thunderstorms here and there as we do head over the next few days. Still a little wet here as we do head into Friday morning. So wet start for areas a little bit further north. But again, not going to rule out some thunderstorm activity here across SoCal, especially towards the more mountainous terrain and also through the deserts as well. 5-day outlook here along the coast. I said temperatures are going to rise here as we head into Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even staying in the upper 70s, low 80s. Low clouds, but brighter skies there by the afternoon. Further inland, we're back up to the 90s and while staying there throughout the weekend. For our mountain areas, highs going to be remaining in the mid-70s over the next few days, even into the weekend. I would say that's overall pretty pleasant, but again, cannot rule out a quick thunderstorm that could produce even some heavier rain. So heads up, keep your eye to the sky. Highs going to be rising slightly as we head into the weekend, past that triple digit or at least that 110-degree mark. So heads up, it's going to be a little steamy for the weekend across the deserts. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
The elaborate cosplay of Comic-Con is now gone, but you can find an equally dazzling display of fandom at Tiki Oasis. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando previews the event, which runs tonight through Sunday at the Town & Country Resort.
Tiki Oasis is about escape. Sure, you can accuse it of cultural misappropriation, but understanding that Tiki culture began when young servicemen were deployed to tropical military bases during World War II and fell in love with island life gives it a context that reveals it started from appreciation, says Tiki Lindy.
So the Tiki culture kind of came about as a Hollywood-esque version, romanticized version of these island cultures. I think those who have been in this world, this Tiki appreciation world truly understand the line between cultural misappropriation and cultural appreciation.
Tiki Oasis boasts that it's the biggest tiki weekender on the planet and will quell your wanderlust and quench your thirst. Tiki Lindy can do the latter with some tiki-era cocktails.
When we talk about tiki-era cocktails, we specifically think back to the two pioneers in tiki bar. So that's Trader Vic, or Vic Bergeron, and Don Beach, or Don the Beachcomber, who back in the 30s and 40s were the two main guys to bring all these disparate island cultures together and the ingredients from those areas to make craft cocktails.
Tiki Lindy is an invited speaker offering tutorials on bringing spice and escapism to a libation.
And so you would tend to see beautiful exotic garnishes, orchids, pineapple leaves, which are called pineapple fronds, fun straws. Like, you'll see a lot of fun escapism just in the drink itself, because it should be both the environment and then the microcosm of your experience right there in front of you with the cocktail.
In addition to cocktail tutorials, you can find seminars on feminism and mid-century architecture, as well as confessions of a fire-eating mermaid. Plus, there's dancing, live music, and an art show. As its name implies, Tiki Oasis provides refuge, relief, and a pleasant contrast to harsh realities. So plan an escape way out west where the sun meets the sea. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
That is cool. One way to keep track of what's happening in San Diego is to sign up for the KPBS newsletters. Options include headlines, KPBS Arts, and North County Focus, which we launched this year. Go to the KPBS newsletter section at kpbs.org to see more. And of course, you can find tonight's stories on our website, which is kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following: and by viewers like you. Thank you.